Thank you guys for attending this virtual conference. We're getting, I think, a lot accomplished. We're having some really amazing conversations. The hour flies by, so let's keep that in mind. Just keep the pace going because it almost feels like we should go to 2 hours on all of these panels. But guess what? First Thursdays of the month, we get another opportunity. So thank you, Cara, for agreeing to moderate this panel for me. Audience, you put your questions into the Q&A and so that we can find them there because they'll get lost in the chat. And also you can save your chat. So please go in there and introduce yourself, give whatever contact information that you feel appropriate, your socials and all of that good stuff. So let's talk about HR in this crazy time. Thank you, Cara.
Oh, thank you so much, Susan, for giving us the opportunity to discuss how we can manage our workplaces and people during this time and how it will likely impact us for years to come even. I'm Kara Bradford, the co-founder and CEO of Viridian Staffing, and I'm very excited about the HR and employment law experts that we've been able to gather together to speak to you today. So before we get started, if all of you could, I'm just going to let each of you introduce yourselves, and then we'll dive into some questions around HR and workplace management. Peggy, do you want to start us off? I think you're on mute, Peggy. All right, Janice, do you want to start us off?
Sure, good afternoon. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm Janice Presley. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources for Manifest 7. We are based in Southern California, and we are a B2B, B2C distribution organization with operations in California and Arizona. And I've been with them for just about a year. Thank you, and glad to be a part of the panel today.
Great, thanks, Janice. Christian, do you want to go next?
Hello, can you all hear me?
A little bit. Might want to get closer to the microphone a little.
Let me try this. Is that better?
Perfect, yes.
Great. So as you can see, my video is not projecting either. I don't think you can see me, so I apologize for that. Working through some technical issues. But anyway, my name is Christian Robeson. I am the Human Resources Director for Candescent, which is the cannabis company located out in Desert Hot Springs. And I've been with the company for just over 2 years and a few months, and have been in the cannabis industry for over 2.5 years total.
Excellent, thank you. Peggy, are you able to go live now? All right, we may have to come back to Peggy. I think we're having a couple of technical glitches happening right now. So, thank you all so much for participating. I know this is a very busy time for all of you right now. And so I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time that you've taken out of your schedule to join us today. To get started, let's chat about some of the challenges and opportunities that your organizations are experiencing. Well, let's talk about what you've experienced immediately, or what you experienced immediately with when COVID came in, and then also if you could speak to what you did to overcome some of those challenges. Janice or Christian, would one of you like to start?
This is Janice, I can start. So for us, most people were either working in one of our facilities, and really no one was working from home. And so I think the biggest transition for our organization was the whole concept of what does work from home look like. And we even have a call center organization that we sent home as well. And so just the accountability and the day-to-day interaction between managers and supervisors, especially when most of us feel like if I can't see you, you could not be working. However, over time, what we realized is that we've been able to see people still be productive, even though they have not, quote unquote, been in an office or in a facility. The other big change for us is that our dispensary and delivery has continued to operate throughout COVID-19. And so one of the other challenges we had was really to make sure that our customers as well as our employees felt safe. Because if you spent any time watching the news, all you would see is people talking about, people being exposed and people being asymptomatic. And so really just kind of calming the troops to let them know that it was okay to be sick if you did feel sick, and then the things that they needed to do in order to feel comfortable. And some of that comfortability was really around giving them options of staying home if they felt sick and not being able to infect others. And then from a social media standpoint, we really had to put some things out there that really showed our customers as well as our employees that we will make a conscious effort to really be responsible for what it meant to social distance in the stores, what it meant to cleanliness around, making sure we were disinfecting and showing our employees wiping down counters and wiping down delivery vehicles, etc. So just really doing things a little bit different and being more cognizant of the outside person who wants to come in. And then we even started some kind of deliver to the curb type things also, just to remain flexible during this time. We really saw an influx of people coming to the dispensary in the very beginning days of the COVID-19 situation. And then over time, we saw more and more people say, hey, I just want it delivered, and just dealing with all of those different nuances. But it's definitely been a challenge.
Thanks, Janice. And have you gotten much feedback from your employees and also the customers as to, are they feeling coming in, and what's the feedback been?
Yeah, some of the feedback has been really good. I know that wait times, especially for people who were trying to do online orders, seem to be increased. So people had to wait a little longer. So sometimes they would call into the dispensary and complain, I've been on the phone for 15 minutes and I can't get anybody to take my order. But again, that should be expected, especially because we're dealing in unprecedented times, and no one could have predicted that this situation would be the way it is right now. And so fortunately, we've been able to remain open. We've not had any employees and or their families, be infected with COVID-19, which is remarkable, considering that we've got several locations throughout California and Arizona. So we are very grateful for that piece. But just like I said, making people feel comfortable. And then I know when cannabis was considered to be an essential business, we also had to equip our employees with documentation. So we revise a letter that said, hey, this is an essential worker. Along with this letter, here is a badge that shows that they are an essential worker and they really are going to work and not just, going to hang out or something like that. So those are just some of the things that we've done. And I think we've gotten pretty good feedback from our customer base because we've been able to deliver to the curb. We've been able to deliver at their homes, and then also allow people to come into the dispensary and exercising social distancing when they came in with, hand wipes and gloves and masks and all of those things. And so it's worked pretty well for us so far.
Excellent. Christian, how about you?
So some of the challenges we faced immediately were, how do we do the social distancing, right? How do we get our employees in a production and manufacturing environment to be 6 feet apart, etc. And so I think some similar challenges for others. We also had a challenge with our local police department, the DHS PD, coming to the facility and essentially trying to shut us down initially and saying that we were not an essential business. So that created a little bit of tension, but we were able to work through that and refer them to the state of California and identify that, yes, in fact, we were considered an essential business. And we had already put in the measures for social distancing. We went to 3 shifts. So our employees were able to have that space that they needed. We also immediately provided the protective PPE, face masks, and gloves, and all of those types of things. So we didn't really have any issues beyond that. We actually added to our headcount. We were very fortunate. We launched a new brand during this time, which we weren't supposed to put out for a couple of months, but under the circumstances felt that it was good timing. And so that has just really helped us as an organization continue the business. So we were very fortunate in that regard.
Excellent. Thanks, Christian. Peggy, can you hear us yet? Or are you back yet? We might still be having some technical difficulties with Peggy, but we've had Dawn join us. Hello, Dawn. How are you? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm good. I'm very sorry. Wi-Fi went to my house and the connection wouldn't work on the hotspot on my phone. So I apologize, but I'm on in my car, as you can see. So I'm here.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. If you wanted to, if you could just maybe introduce yourself real quick, and then a question that, so we've been talking about the changes that we've had to make because of, or some of the challenges and opportunities that we've had to overcome because of COVID. And, what I was going to ask you as well is, just from a legal perspective, are there any changes that companies have made that maybe they actually shouldn't have made those changes because it could potentially violate any potential labor laws? Is there anything like that you've seen, or changes that you would like to see that maybe haven't been implemented yet?
I guess in my experience, I even had this yesterday and today. I had a client reach out to me asking me what they should be doing differently, and come to find out they've still been operating. These are construction-oriented type business, but without taking any kind of steps in terms of making any changes. And so I think it's really incumbent upon all businesses right now to make sure that you're looking at the orders for every jurisdiction you operate in. So that would be your county health orders, as well as the state, and then the federal guidelines. And then just staying in regular touch with the information on the CDC's website. I've even been getting some questions over the last few days as we head into phase 2 about steps for businesses that have not been operating over the last couple of months. And there's some really good resources for even smaller businesses on the CDC's website as you prepare to reopen. And so, again, just the biggest thing is making sure that you're regularly checking in. I know even last week I had questions when San Diego had their county orders come into effect for face mask coverings. And I had questions on, well, when do I need that? And what if we're both in our cubicles? Or what if we're still staying 6 feet apart? It's important to look at the orders for each specific jurisdiction to make sure that you're in compliance.
Excellent. Thanks, Dawn. And so, Christian, I know you mentioned that you were adding people, but I guess for both you and Janice, have you seen the job responsibilities or just the scope of what the workers' jobs are change for your employees? And if that's the case, what has the response been amongst your employees for having certain job responsibilities change?
And before you answer that, could you get way closer to your mic? We're having a hard time hearing you.
This is Janice. Is this better?
Not you, Janice, Christian.
Oh, okay, got it.
Shoot.
Okay, so what I was going to say is that for our organization, I mentioned earlier that we've transitioned a lot of people to working from home. And so because they've been working from home, including some non-exempt or hourly employees, one of the things that we really had to take a look at is making sure that they weren't working too many hours. And if they were working over their standard 8 hours a day, because we're mostly in California, making sure that they're paid appropriately and them not answering calls calls, 24 hours a day or different things like that, and just making sure that the managers know when their employees are working and that they keep it like that, because it's very difficult for people who are working at home. The day just gets away from you, and next thing you know, you've been working 9 hours and you should only have been working 8. So really just managing the overtime, and then making sure that the employees are really taking their breaks and meal breaks, as well as regular breaks as well, has been a challenge to us, because again, if you are a call center employee, you kind of get caught up in your day and forget the fact that you haven't eaten, even though you are quote unquote working from home. But I think a lot of it also had to do with us being flexible for our employees, because some of them were also managing this concept of homeschool. I'm an empty nester, so I don't have those issues, but managing children and pets and other people that are in place in the home, and you're trying to work in a call center environment, for some people it didn't work. And then also making sure that they had the equipment and the things that they needed to kind of manage their day-to-day work. So we had to issue technology equipment, hotspots, those kind of things, just to make sure that those employees had what they needed in order to be successful. And then make that kind of their new normal, because for the last almost 2 months, that's what they've been doing. Again, something that we never thought we would ever do, which is to take call center people there. And then when you think about the salaried people, it's like work never ends. So you find people sending emails on Saturdays in the middle of the night and on Sundays, when normally they may or may not be working because they're not quote unquote working from home. So I think it's just been an adjustment for everybody to just really look at the things that they're doing on a day-to-day, and kind of work-life balance, which is a term that is kind of used by a lot of people, but just understanding what that really means, especially in a COVID-19 world.
Thanks, Janice. And Christian, I don't know if you heard the question when it came through. I was asking about changes in job responsibilities or scope of work. Have you all had any experience with that?
Not necessarily. Can you hear me okay? Because I understand that there are some challenges. Is that better?
Yes, much better.
Okay, yeah, I apologize. It's technical difficulty day, and the internet crashed at the same time. So I apologize. So I haven't seen necessarily a huge shift in responsibilities. What we did is we set up with a couple of different agencies, temporary agencies, to help fill in gaps. So when we did have some folks shift to having to either stay home or take care of a loved one or whatever the circumstances may be, we were able to quickly fill some of those gaps. I think we had maybe 8 employees who didn't come in during this pandemic, and that's not bad considering we have over 200 employees, including the temps right now.
Yeah, that's excellent. That definitely has been our number one call that comes through on a frequent basis the past 2 months, is how quickly we can get workers into people because of the situation where people aren't coming in or someone is exposed. And we'll kind of talk about implications when that happens here in a second. But before we get to that, Dawn, are there any legal or insurance implications if we do have employees that were having to repurpose into different roles or give different responsibilities, specifically around wage and hour, like Janice was talking about it,
my internet's bad.
and also workers' compensation? Could you maybe speak to any of the legal implications that we might have?
Sure. Well, that's an excellent question, very timely, especially considering some recent developments. I'm telling you, it's day by day that came down from the governor's office. Yesterday, he issued an executive order. It's Executive Order N6220. I recommend if this is of interest to you, you can pull it and check it out. I apologize because my daughter is having to do a Zoom class at the same time when we fled our house with no internet. So there is a rebuttable presumption that if a employee now contracts COVID-19 and they are working, that it was related to work. And so there's a series of steps that would have to be met in order to now establish a workers' comp claim. But essentially, if an employee gets COVID-19 and they tested positive within, it says 14 days after a day that they performed labor or services at their place of employment at the employer's direction. Again, it's a rebuttable presumption that they contracted it while they were working. And the interesting thing it goes on to talk about is it's going to make it where there's no waiting period. And it's also available for employees to be able to qualify for temporary disability. So that's a big implication. I'd say if you've read about that, there's been a lot of objection within the management side, the business side, just because of the fact that it is concerning as to whether or not people are going to be able to establish they actually got it at work. But this is very favorable for employees. So that's one point. And then your other question was if you have employees that are performing other job duties and responsibilities. One thing I caution is as people prepare to have more onboarding, I know there's a plan for many businesses to be able to take employees' temperatures and assess different health status. And you want to make sure that you have somebody who's trained to be able to perform that, and also make sure that you've taken steps to protect that person, because they're going to end up being potentially more exposed than they ever would before. So that's one consideration. And then the other thing is just thinking about if you do have job descriptions, perhaps providing that to people and making sure they're familiar with what the essential functions of their job are, because that's always something you're looking at if someone ever were to make a disability claim at a later point in time, is what the essential functions of the job were.
Thanks, Danya. And I've been hearing some ramblings as well around companies altering their reimbursement policies. So their employees and they're allowing to reimburse charging for employees buying thermometers so they can basically check their own temperature in the car before they even come into the facility. There's been some discussion around other things that are maybe weren't traditionally considered for reimbursement that are being considered now. So for companies that perhaps you don't have the single-use mask or the N95 mask for your employees, that if they're being asked to launder those the cloth mask on a daily basis or all their clothes on a daily basis, you know, do we reimburse that? So there's a lot of evolving discussion and conversation around that, but something definitely from I'm hearing ramblings about, so probably something to keep your ear out for. Don, have you heard anything, or Christian or Janice, have any of you heard anything about that yet?
Well, I just want to touch on, you referenced reimbursements, and I think that's something that could readily be another wave of potential litigation. Is remember that California Labor Code Section 2802 requires reimbursement for any expenses that an employee incurs in the scope of performing their work. And so if businesses are not providing equipment, PPE, you need to make sure that you're reimbursing your employees for that, because there could be a potential claim if you're not managing that appropriately.
Excellent, thanks very much. So let's move on to talk about SOPs. You know, I think all of our companies have had SOPs in place, and now we're getting all sorts of new guidance. So any of you want to speak to any of the new standard operating procedures that you've had to put in place since COVID, since COVID started?
So at Candescent, we implemented more stringent cleaning policies. We already had SOPs, obviously, for cleaning because of the nature of what we do. It just raised awareness about every surface in the building, door handles, the walls in the hallways in different areas as you're going through entries and exits. So we really heightened that, and I don't think that that's something that we will be changing. I also think that we will continue to utilize masks and gloves even as things relax, particularly in light of the potential for workers' comp claims. I think if we can show that we have taken every possible precaution on behalf of our employees, it will help us in that regard, hopefully, that we can show that we are really, really taking extra steps to keep our employees safe and keep the product integrity as well.
I was going to say that for us, the same thing. Of course, we did not have a policy on social distancing or wearing masks before all of this COVID-19 took place. We also did something early on, which was distribute thermometers to our employees, especially those that worked in the dispensary and that were delivery drivers, and basically asked them to take their own temperatures at the beginning of the shift. So just the little ones that you put on your forehead, so not a whole lot of that, and basically said if you have a temperature of over 100 degrees that you probably need to stay home or not come in, but just doing something like that. The other thing is we've also had conversations with employees who have said that they didn't feel well, but then asked them specifically, have you been around someone with COVID, or and encourage them to use our telenurse, which is part of our employee benefits program. So they're able to do, whether they participated with our medical insurance or not, every employee had access to that, which also included our employee assistance program. So they were able to actually do like teledoc type appointments to meet with someone, you know, to talk about their symptoms. And then they will make a recommendation if they needed to go and be tested or not. So I do know we've had a couple of people who have been tested, but fortunately those tests turned out to be negative. And then, like I said earlier, just really trying to make sure that we practice all of the cleanliness a lot more. It's almost like when you were kids and your parents would take you into a public restroom and they say, don't touch anything. And so we're kind of implementing that don't touch anything, you know, around the office spaces, et cetera, and having, you know, hand wipes and hand sanitizers and gloves and those things around so that people, if they want to bring in their own, that's their business. But we also have provided that for all of our employees during this time, and anticipate that that's something that we'll continue to do for the foreseeable future.
Excellent. Thanks, Janice. And I believe Peggy's joined us now. Peggy, can you hear me okay? Can I hear you?
I'm finally in. I kept getting kicked out and I don't know why, but I did want to join the conversation, particularly about SOPs. At BPG, where I work, the Berkeley Patients Group, our SOPs are subject to constant revision as we strive to be more efficient in the face of frequent regulatory changes. We post SOPs on Basecamp, which is a communications technology that we use for all staff. And the reason I wanted to get into this conversation now was I noted earlier in the day that Debbie Goldsberry from Magnolia Wellness posted that she is pulling together a team to pull together industry-wide SOPs as we return to work, and crowd sharing that, and using this opportunity to bring in scientists and researchers so that we're making the best possible moves to protect our staff and our customers.
Excellent. Oh. Excellent. Thanks so much, Peggy. So of the SOPs that you all are putting into place and establishing the new ones, I know, Christian, you touched on this a bit in terms of what you see staying in place after the fact, and after we kind of go back to, well, we'll get into if we're ever going back to normal or there's the new normal now, right? But are there any SOPs that any of you have put into place that that you feel you're going to continue keeping those in place?
So this is Janice. We definitely are going to continue with social distancing and not having group meetings, to do more Zoom meetings and other things like that, primarily to kind of keep the numbers down. I know that in the state of California, they've, you know, talked about, you know, what social distancing is, meaning, you know, no big team meetings, but we've had several all employee meetings
almost on a bi-weekly basis since COVID-19 happened. And we've done that from wherever you were. So there were no group gatherings to do, you know, all staff meetings. It's basically your own device or whatever you were at work, you know, a computer or whatever. But I think that's definitely going to continue from a communication standpoint, just to make sure that people are safe. And I think that overall the employees have felt that they've been safe because they haven't been gathering and doing some of the things that you see other people doing, you know, on the news or whatever, but just kind of doing some things a little bit differently. We probably will do something around food events, meaning that food will probably be delivered in individual boxes versus the kind of let's do a buffet type thing that we've done in the past. So those are just a couple of things that I see now that we've already put in place that are probably going to go forward in the future.
Anyone else, or do any of you, you know, we've heard quite a few companies who are bringing in people to cleaning companies to disinfect in between, or they're having employees do that that weren't necessarily always doing that before. Is that something that you think will continue to be in place going forward? Not saying that you weren't doing it before, but kind of the deep clean that we're seeing. Is anyone kind of looking at that and seeing that going forward?
I think we have had a few people that were designated to helping maintain the cleanliness and check on the bathrooms and the break room and again the hallways, entries, exits, door handles, as well as keeping doors open as opposed to closed, so that we minimized how much touching was happening of surfaces, and we will maintain that as well. And have those people continue to just verify. We have a cleaning service that comes in a couple of times a week as well. So that's helpful. And I don't think we'll be changing that either.
So we have a cleaning service that comes into a couple of our facilities, and I think just having them do things a little bit differently than just emptying the trash. And you know, so we have, you know, refrigerators that are used by employees, but you know, doing a more thorough, you know, take your stuff home, it's going to be thrown away, that kind of thing, because it's a quote unquote shared environment. But just doing things like that that are kind of could be considered above and beyond, but because of the times in which we're in, we don't think we have a whole lot of choices but to do that. But the cleaning people have been asked to do a little bit more than they did before, which was basic, you know, vacuum the floors and empty the trash, but you know, wiping down surfaces, that kind of thing on a daily basis.
Yeah, we've seen with some of our clients where we have temporary workers out working that they've expanded to multiple shifts, and especially those in processing that have some of these, you know, incredible pieces of extraction equipment that are designed to run 24 hours around the clock if you want them to. They may not have been running them 24 hours around the clock before, but now they've taken the workers and are spreading the shifts out, are spreading the people out over multiple shifts, and now the machine's going to be running, you know, around the clock instead. So we've seen some things like that. In terms of the cleaning, a lot of companies are shortening the workday of our workers. So instead of working an 8-hour day, they're working basically a 7-hour day, and then a cleaning crew comes in for an hour. And that process kind of continues, you know, basically 7 hours on, and then cleaning crew comes in, 7 hours, cleaning crew, 7 hours, cleaning crew. And so they're having workers work around the clock compared to before, where they might just have workers working 1 shift or 2 shifts a day. So now we're seeing those 3 shifts a day. And a lot of companies are thinking about continuing on with that. It's seeming to work well for them, and they're going to continue doing that going forward. So I want to just address issue when workers are coming to us when they fear that they have been, well, either one, they have the symptoms themselves and are showing symptoms for COVID, or they have a family member who maybe has tested positive or is showing symptoms. Have any of you set a time frame or established an SOP for the employees that, okay, if this situation happens, how quickly do they need to report it to you? If we can maybe talk around that, maybe some of the leave implications that come into play when that happens.
So for our organization, it's immediate notification to the supervisor, and then the supervisor, of course, would then reach out to HR. But the first point is stay home. If you feel like if you've been exposed or you're having symptoms. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we have this employee assistance program that also does a teledoc. So the next call is for that employee or their family member to call the teledoc and do an appointment. And then if there is a need for testing, then do the testing. And then they cannot come back until we know either they are negative, and if they test positive, of course, the traditional 14 days, or until they don't have any symptoms for 4 days. But like I said, we've only had a couple of people who thought they had symptoms. They were tested, and then after the testing, they turned out to be negative, which was fortunate. So we haven't had the actual, scenario where someone was, but we know that the whole Family First Act and all of the things that come with that, they would basically be paid for the quarantine time period if the situation were to be anything different.
So they need to notify you immediately, Janice?
Yes, yes.
Is everyone else kind of on that same path of immediate notification, or is there any other kind of operating procedures that you all put into place?
It is immediate notification. We are also, again, I think like many businesses are now, if you feel sick, if you don't feel well, stay home. That's the first communication and consistent communication we've had during this entire process is even if you have the sniffles, stay home. We don't want you to come in. So I know that's oftentimes a big shift for where we have been, I think, as a culture and society, where it's okay, or it's, come if you have a little cold or whatever. I think that's a big shift for us culturally in our country, generally speaking. So I think that's going to take some adapting to for businesses to adjust to that mentality, if you will.
Yeah, I'd agree, Christian. I feel like for decades we've always said, okay, unless you have a fever, just tough it out and go into the office or go into the store. And if you have a fever, yeah, maybe go home. But that definitely is a mindset change, I think, for all of us. At least that's the way my thought process has been the past 2 decades. So I think a lot of folks are like that as well. Anyone else have a different policy or procedure for workers that are exhibiting symptoms, which I know that they keep changing. I think they added, six new symptoms in the past couple of weeks. So anyone else have any kind of different policy and procedure? Or Dawn, is there any policy or procedure that we should be having with employees, or anything about privacy that we should be taking into consideration?
Well, privacy is, that's an interesting situation for people to muddle through. Let's say you have an employee who alerts you then that they were positive, or perhaps even had a family member that was positive. A question I've debated with a lot of clients is, how do you handle the situation of alerting other employees who might have come into contact with that person? And I have helped some clients prepare a written notice. I would say that would be best practice, is to advise people who have come into contact of the fact that they might have been exposed and give them some information on what to look for. But then the question is, as to privacy, you know, you would be asked, well, who was it? And you're not allowed to say. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, as well as for those that are operating in California, the California equivalent, the Fair Employment Housing Act, there's a privacy issue with disclosing that information. But of course, you know, in order to maybe be able to assess your risk exposure, you might need to know who it is. And so I've been talking to clients, just depending on the size of the business, of how much information they share. Maybe you say somebody worked in a certain department or a certain part of the building, and just get as close to providing them with, you know, who it was without necessarily saying a name.
Kara, I was going to say also that the person that thought they could have been exposed was a delivery driver. And so when we were notified that they thought that they may have been exposed by a roommate, we started putting together a plan for, if this is true, what we needed to do. And that included notifying the staff, the other people that they were around on a day-to-day basis, as well as potentially notifying customers that they may have been have delivered product to. And so we had that plan in place only after, you know, the situation, but fortunately we didn't have to use it. And that was going to involve us contacting each person that particular employee had delivered to for, you know, the past few days. So that was something else that we did put in place as a result of, you know, kind of the COVID. I think I'm, you know, might have COVID-19, you know, scare, but it really helped us to kind of walk through all of the implications and things that we needed to do to be prepared. We never had any intention of disclosing to the general public, of course, who the employee was, but in this particular case, it would have been pretty obvious to the other employees because the delivery team at that particular location was small and everybody could say, oh yeah, I haven't seen so-and-so in a couple of days. So it would be, even though we never said anything, it would be, you know, pretty hard to not for the other employees to know who it was, because in this particular location there were less than 10 employees in that particular location. So just, you know, making sure that if and when. And then the other thing that I want to interject around COVID-19 is that even though a lot of things are opening up now over the next, you know, few weeks or so, the understanding that at least I'm getting from, you know, news reports, et cetera, is that we may have a second wave or a third wave in the fall. And so even if we haven't been affected now, that's not to say that, you know, 3 to 6 months from now, we are not back in this exact same situation. And so just doing what we can to mitigate any kind of risk, not only for our employees, but also for our customers, and then continuing to practice social distancing, using PPE, et cetera, are things that I think every organization, every person should do, you know, as they go forth on their day-to-day, you know, routines.
Yeah, thanks. I know when I pull a bunch of several HR and employment law experts together and we get in a room, you know, we often do express all of those concerns that we have about when we start relaxing the standards. I mean, in California, we're, well, you can view it either way about opening back up, whether you think that's fortunate that we're going so slowly in California or not fortunate. But I guess my question for you all is, you know, kind of what's keeping you all up at night that as these standards do start to get relaxed, you know, what are your concerns and worries? Like Janice said, that they're now saying there might be a second wave. So, you know, how are we protecting our employees and our customers, you know, from that potentially happening down the road? Any guidance or advice on what we should be thinking about?
Kara, I'll take that one. I already know what's been giving me some heartburn over the last week is dealing with a couple situations with employees who don't want to come back to work. And perhaps their business is now at a juncture where they're able to return. and the business has taken the appropriate steps. But how do you as a business deal with the fact if someone won't return? And I just hate to ever be in a position of having to terminate someone because they don't want to come back to work and they don't feel safe. But we've had some situations where it's a small workforce and had to tell employees that, look, you know, we're going to have to replace you if at some point you don't return. Because I've even had instances where people have said they don't want to return until stage 4, and we don't know when that's going to be. So it's a really hard situation. I feel bad for my clients who they're having to encounter that situation, because I can certainly empathize with the people who have some concerns in returning.
I think for us, one of the things that happened today, I had a supervisor contact me about an employee that they wanted to write up on attendance. And so they're saying this person's always late, et cetera, et cetera. And so I said to them, why are they late? Are they sick or is something going on? And it's like, oh, well, they live in Mexico. So we have operations in San Diego. And so I'm not sure if everybody knows what's going on at the border, but at the border could be closed. So do we hold that person accountable for being late to work because they've been sitting at the border for 2 hours trying to get across to get to work? The answer is no. So again, just understanding the why and not going to our standard HR policies of saying, oh, this person is late, I'm going to write them up because they've been late 10 times. Even if the employee left 3 hours before, the distance from crossing the border to, you know, San Diego, where the office is not that far, maybe a 20-minute drive. So again, if they've been sitting at the border for 2 or 3 hours trying to get across, that's not necessarily their fault or something that they can control. And so just kind of putting the humanism back into those conversations. And like Don said, you know, if you've got people that don't want to come back to work because they're fearful, they're older or whatever the situations, you'll have to take each situation separately, which is very different from somebody just being late and they live across the street and they're just being lazy and they don't show up to work. So just kind of be an understanding of everybody's situation is different. I know for me personally, I'm going to continue to practice social distancing from a personal standpoint as well as a professional standpoint, and definitely encourage our teams to do the same thing. I don't have to allow you to come into my office or come into my space, but you can stand at the door and we can have a great conversation, or we can do it on Zoom or something like that, just because I don't want to be infected and I don't want to infect someone else. And again, because I don't know if I'm asymptomatic or if they're asymptomatic. But again, just to continue to practice as if everybody around me has COVID-19 and that's how I'm going to behave, as if everybody is infected. And so stay away from me as I go about my day to day. And not to make light of it, but I mean, that's just the reality, because it's not like everybody has a C on their head, you know, you have COVID-19. So you just have to really act like everybody that you come in contact has it until you know that they don't. So.
Go ahead.
This is Peggy weighing in. I've been sheltered in place since March 16th, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to work with my people. But what I think about a lot is our customers, our patients, come to us for treatment for various traumas they've experienced in life, be that experiences or illnesses, things like that. And many of our employees are also patients of ours. For the last several months, our employees have been the first responders in this pandemic. And I think a lot about how just in the course of a regular day, they're exposed to what we call vicarious trauma by dealing consistently and kindly and compassionately with our patients and our customers. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about how we move our ethos more strongly into wellness, and how to create a work culture that's centered on fundamental self-care. And also coming up with ways to support our employees who have kept our business afloat during this difficult time, emotionally and financially.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Peggy. And we've seen, so we're operational across the entire US and in Canada. And as states and provinces start to open up, having employees worried about as customers and patients are coming in, those individuals feeling relaxed and that, everything is fine now and, it's opened back up so they can just come in and not have to worry. And how do we make our employees who, as you mentioned, some are often patients themselves, how do we make sure that they feel safe and protected and that, what have we put into place during this time in order to do that? We have some customers who put up like plexiglass in between specifically at dispensaries, in between the customer and also our staff, makes them feel a little bit safer, but how do we make sure that they're still going to want to come to work and are still happy in their roles as things are opening up. So that's what keeps me up at night, is just wanting to keep the employees happy. And I spend a lot of time getting people into this industry from other industries that are really just amazing employees. And I don't want them to go back to those other industries. And so that's what keeps me up at night, is how do we keep them in the cannabis industry versus going back. So so we have, I think, Susan, do we have about 8 minutes left?
Yeah, that's correct. I wanted to interject one thing. Congressman Lou Carrera called me this morning and he said, what can I do for you? How can I help? And I said, well, I've been, among other things, but I've been hearing a lot of operators are concerned about getting sued because of COVID-19. And he said, oh, the lawsuits are coming. They are definitely coming. And he was raising concerns about it to his colleagues, and they told him to knock it off and not talk about the lawsuits. So that was really a concerning answer that he gave me.
Dawn, do you want to tackle that as our resident?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw me unmuting simultaneously. I don't know if you all had seen, I would say a month ago, there was already a filing against Walmart. It was a big high profile national filing related to a death of a person who had worked, and their family said that Walmart hadn't taken appropriate steps to ensure the safety of their workplace. And it's frightening. And it's interesting as I talk to people and their businesses of what steps are you taking, you're really challenging them to, again, make sure that you're regularly taking a look at the guidance from the CDC and just doing everything you can. Make sure you keep in mind guidance for your particular industry. One I helped out with just recently was like on childcare, and they had additional licensing guidance that had come out. But just do everything within your power to avoid a situation where somebody says that you did not take all the appropriate steps that were required, and then go above and beyond. Because yes, I agree, the lawsuits are coming.
Yes, it's, I want to thank everyone today that has been taking their time to listen in to us, and also to be a part of this panel, and to the panelists. All of you have such great expertise in HR and have been in it for years. And so I know that all of us are learning too, as we continue to get guidance, and that guidance and laws change and evolve. As Don was saying, daily. I think Gavin signed the executive order yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, on the workers' compensation executive order. So things are just changing quickly. Definitely keep your ear to the ground, be patient, get the policies into place as you can. But thank you so much to our experts that were on the panel today. Any lasting words from any of you before we move on to the next panel?
Well, I would say for businesses that are getting ready to get, operating and opening again, as the gears start opening and grinding, just make sure you've taken this time to, develop the safety protocols and order that PPE and make sure that you're ready. So when the time comes, you've done the work up front.
I think for me, just being flexible. Again, these are unprecedented times, and because none of us are, fortune tellers, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but just remain flexible and, kind of give people the benefit of the doubt. And like I said, for us, we really have relied on our employee assistance program to really help people through this time, especially those who were afraid. In the beginning, they can do, one-on-one counseling. We send out newsletters and things about, how to manage anxiety, how to manage stress. So those are the things that people are worried about right now. And those are some things that you can put in place for your employees. Thank you.
I think the other thing, Kara, this is Christian. I think the other thing that I don't know that we touched on is training our leaders, our supervisors, our leads, our management team, people that are responsible for teams of individuals, and making sure that they know and understand. It's really important to exercise patience and flexibility and understanding during this time as we're dealing with employees or people who are dealing with childcare issues or healthcare issues or loved ones that are at a higher risk of contracting and being impacted by this. And as an example, I have one employee who had a cousin in Florida die, and now a brother-in-law that's affected on the West Coast. So when you look at that and you think 2 people in one family, right? That's pretty significant, and it's different than the flu. It's not the flu, and we already know that. So again, I think it's just educating the leadership, educating our employees, and keeping the lines of communication open, that we're working together as a team to maintain our jobs, to maintain production, and to continue to provide the medication to people, our customers. And I think all of that's really a key component right now. And utilizing EAPs, absolutely, the employee assistance programs, it's a huge opportunity for them to take advantage of those benefits.
Hi, this is Peggy. I just want to note that this pandemic is laying bare the disparities that we experience in this country, particularly among communities of color. And so I'm hoping as a cannabis community that we'll come out of this with an increased focus on our mission and compassion and the care that we have for our patients and each other. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. Patience and grace, I think, are what we need to all consider moving forward. So again, thank you so much to the panelists. I appreciate you taking your time. Patience and grace with your HR professionals, friends, please, as well. We're all adapting and being agile as quickly as we can as well. So Susan, thank you also for giving us this platform and for letting us share with everyone, and we'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, panelists. That was really great. You don't have to log off. I can put you on as an attendee so you can see our next panel. It's going to be really great about financial relief. So we're going to have a 15-minute break. Go stretch your legs and use the restroom and run in place. Get ready to get focused for an outstanding panel. Thank you so much, you guys.